Hey, what's up? I'm Sarah Ray with the Atheist community of Polk County. I'm stoked to be the MC for this year's Free Flow, the Free Thought Florida Conference.
Orlando, November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. The whole weekend is going to be groovy.
I'll be rapping about separation of church and state.
I'll be talking about what might have made America great.
And I will be tripping. No, I will not be doing any tripping.
I'll be talking about the role of science in secular humanism.
Evolution education.
Community organizing and activism.
Transgender equality in America today.
Americans' attitudes toward, wait for it,
agnostics.
I'll be giving the skinny on how summer camp can help build a secular community for kids.
Science education here in the Sunshine State.
Black feminism, free thought, and progressive politics.
You can get your groove on at the Friday night cocktail party.
Friday night cocktails and costumes party, which kicks off the weekend.
We're going to lay down that funky music until we die.
Costumes are optional, but at least some disco will be mandatory.
I personally won't be there unless there's disco.
Join me and hundreds of other science enthusiasts,
Atheists,
Secular humanists,
Heretics,
Feminists,
skeptics,
Non-believers,
Satanists,
And freaky freethinkers.
Tickets are at freeflow.org. That's freeflo.org.
so do me a solid and register today at freeflow.org.
catch you on the flip side.
They should let me write these.
Hello and welcome to the Atheist Committee of Polk County meeting in the library. So we have some housekeeping rules. So the safety evacuation routes, the door over there where you came in, and that door, if you were like one of the people that came in and you didn't know that that was an entrance, then you could go out over there. I don't know if you have to, but it says please turn off or silence your phones. We do have drinks and snacks to your left. There's Oreos, water, and Dr. Pepper and Coke. And as a nonprofit, we have been allowed to use this space for free, but if we make it a mess, they do charge us, so please be careful and respect the space. Restrooms, when you exit the restroom, please do not close the door. They lock, so the restrooms are over there to your right. That door. Last Saturday, our volunteers pulled 26 bags of trash and a couple of old tires from our section of Old Dixie Highway in Auburndale. And then we went out for breakfast, which I think is going to become a regular thing if you want to come out and put in some work in the community. You can find those on Facebook and Meetup. Our speaker this month is Mario Morano. Right over there. He's a licensed mental health counselor who specializes in working with what does that say? What does that say? What? I never heard that word. Adolescents and adults who struggle with anger, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, family relationships, technology addiction, issues related to working in the healthcare and mental health fields, and traumatic life events. Mario is trained in accelerated resolution therapy, an approach that can decrease and even resolve PTSD, whatever that means.
I'll teach you.
Symptoms in as few as 1 through 2 sessions. He comes all the way from Newport Richey to talk with us about religious trauma and recovery. Please join me in welcoming our guest, Mario Morano.
Nice.
Well, thank you.
Goodbye.
He could do the whole presentation. Yeah. All right, good afternoon, everybody. If you'll bear with me, this is my first time doing something like this with a microphone, so if I'm a little loud, normally when I run groups, it's without the microphone and I'm just talking. So, and I hope my shirt is appropriate.
Let me see. What does it say?
What's your name, sir? What's your name? Austin. What kind of music do you like? Oh. We all grow up eventually. Yeah, so in my other life, I am an avid music fan, and I also play a little bit of guitar, and I was actually playing a cover set last night where we've actually played a lot of Bad Religion songs, and I thought might as well keep that theme going for today. So anyway, who am I? Who is anyone, right? My name is Morano. I have a master's degree in mental health counseling. I have a license in mental health counseling. And that means that I can practice therapy, pretty much do everything a psychologist can do except for testing, which is boring. I work as a teen, adult, and family therapist at Growth and Recovery Counseling Center, which is in Trinity, Florida. It's really in Newport Richey, but we don't claim Newport Richey, so we say Trinity. I also am a behavioral health therapist with the Baycare Health System. I know there's a Baycare hospital over here. They're kind of spreading everywhere. And then I'm also a substance abuse counselor at Riverside Recovery, which is an addictions inpatient facility in Tampa. And if anyone has any questions about those types of facilities, what kind of treatment is provided there, I'm happy to answer questions. Normally when I'm at those facilities, I'm running groups, and when I'm at the private practice in Trinity is when I see people one-on-one. So as he mentioned, I am a certified accelerated resolutions therapy counselor, which is not something I'm going to talk about today because it's a whole different thing altogether. But I'll talk about some things that are related to it, but I'm happy to answer questions about it because if people have significant trauma that they've suffered from, I find that it's a ridiculously effective form of treatment. And if anyone needs help, I can help you find people in the area who can actually provide that service. I'm a believer in nothing, at least I try to be. I would consider myself in the belief spectrum, I'm probably more of a secular humanist with some theistic tendencies, but nobody's perfect. And I'm not the world's best PowerPoint presentation creator, so please bear with me. And at any point in time, again, I'm used to running groups, so I'm used to people speaking out at any point in time. If someone has a question, either raise hand or just call it out. No harm. Let's see. Does this do it? It does. So, there is a thing called religious trauma syndrome. It is not listed in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistic Manual for Mental Health. It is not something that your psychiatrist or therapist probably has heard of or will talk about. It's not well understood, not on insurance panels. Again, shocking, right? No medication specifically designed for it, but that's actually true for a lot of problems. Not going to get much sympathy from religious people, but that's kind of the point, right? Those people in our lives who are believers, not that there's anything particularly wrong with them necessarily, are not necessarily going to be sympathetic when you say that you've suffered at the hands of religious beliefs or religious people. And very often, I'll talk a little bit more about this, they will try to help you rejoin the faith, right? Which is not what you need. So it's not what talked about, but that's why Sarah asked me to come, so we can actually talk about it. So I actually had to do some research of my own because I'm familiar with trauma, but not familiar with the term religious trauma syndrome. And so what I found is that there's really one person who specializes in it, famously anyway, Dr. Marlene Weinell, PhD. And so I kind of copied some stuff from her because it's her like field. And if you look her up on YouTube, she's got lots of talks about it. Has anyone heard of her before? So worth a look. And honestly, I don't want to, copy someone else's work. But I think it was worth talking about. So religious trauma syndrome, in the words of Dr. Marlene Weinell, is comprised of several different components. One is the cognitive component: confusion, poor critical thinking ability, negative beliefs about yourself, negative beliefs about your own ability, your self-worth, black and white thinking, perfectionism, difficulty with decision making. None of those things mean that you are a incomplete, bad, or broken person. They are results of trauma, however. We have emotional symptoms: depression, anxiety, anger, grief, loneliness, difficulty with pleasure, and loss of meaning, which is something I'll talk about. Social, this is one where I would imagine that almost everyone in this room can relate to this one. Loss of social network, family rupture, social awkwardness, even sexual difficulty, behind schedule on developmental tasks, and then cultural unfamiliarity with secular world, feeling like a fish out of water, difficulty belonging, information gaps, and she uses the examples of evolution, modern art, and music, right? Like when it comes to evolution, my hope anyway, is that a lot of you guys are actually pretty well versed on that, and you probably interact with a lot of people who aren't. I mean, on the way over here, my girlfriend Julia and I passed Rifle Range Road. And I thought, wow, you guys need an atheist society. So, but yeah, no, and working in the field of mental health, you'd be surprised. I have horror stories from other counselors believing that clients are possessed. Saying things like, really, you believe that we just crawled out of the water and we were fish and now we're people? What kind of ridiculous thing is that? And it's like, dude, when you're talking about mental health, like, evolution's the only game in town, right? I mean, and so what I think is great about, and again, this is an assumption and we shouldn't prejudge people, but like my assumption when I'm talking to people who are non-theists is that you probably have done some research of your own. You've probably looked into evolutionary psychology. You probably at least have an interest in science, right? Kid was wearing a NASA shirt earlier, right? Yes, sir.
Is there an active effort to get this into the 6th edition?
Well, so, couple-part answer. In the past, the DSM always came out with Roman numerals. And this time when they wrote the 5, it is actually 5.0. And the reason for that is that the hope is that instead of having to write a whole new DSM-6, that there will be like a 5.1, 5.2. And right now the answer is no. But I mean, there are things that they are working on. I mean, like they're working on getting gambling addiction actually listed. Right now it's just listed as like a V code, which is something that you can list as a potential problem. So there's several things that they're actually, I think online shopping actually might get actually listed as a DSM diagnosis. But
is there some kind of threshold it must cross before it gets their attention and ends up being listed?
I would imagine yes, and what we can do about that is talk about it, right? So, like, the things that Dr. Weinell lists as symptoms of religious trauma syndrome really can fall under just symptoms of trauma. I wouldn't hold your breath on religious trauma syndrome being listed in the DSM. However, what I want to talk about today is how we can identify our own issues and how we can talk about it in a way that maybe other people can understand. Right? I mean, like, and honestly, I am a firm believer that pretty much everybody should be in therapy, right? And that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's just something that is valuable. And yes, when you're a hammer, all you see is nails, so I'm a therapist, and I think everyone should be in therapy. But I think there's some truth to that. When you go and talk to your therapist and you say, I have religious trauma syndrome, first of all, therapists don't like you naming your diagnosis anyway. Like, they want to be the one to come up with it because we want to think we're smart. So when you say that you might get an eyebrow raised, honestly, okay, right? Because if we're talking about the problems that you experience in your life, then it doesn't matter what the name is, right? And I think that that's more important. Like, we can get really disgruntled and say there's no one to help me because no one understands, or we can try to find ways around that boundary and actually seek help that is available, right? And that's something that I'm going to talk about. I believe very much in. I don't know if that answers your question.
I suspected that there's not much traction there.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
But okay, right? I mean, like, any kind of illness, as long as we're being helped and, like, treated for it, who cares what they call it? Right? So I think that that's really important. I mean, like, trauma is trauma, right? So we might not get, and people need to be validated. We might not get the validation that we need by someone saying, yes, it's because of this system of beliefs that have caused other people to now do things that are harmful to you or caused you to do things that are harmful to yourself. But we might still get help, right? So Dr. Wendell says that leaving cherished faith is much like the end of a marriage. The symptoms of separation are quite similar: grief, anger, guilt, depression, lowered self-esteem, and social isolation. And I think that is very important to talk about because I have an assumption. How many people are happy to be atheists? Right? If you're happy with your life choices, you're happy with your beliefs, then you might not want to think about the fact that there actually is a loss that's involved. Leaving something unhealthy is still a loss. And there's this concept of comfort zones. We become comfortable not with that which is pleasant and soft and fluffy and cushy, right? We become comfortable with what we know. And if what we know is some form of violence, is some form of oppression, it sounds ridiculous to say that you're comfortable there because we're not physically comfortable at all, right? But we are creatures of habit, and it's very, very easy to feel uncomfortable with something new, even if that new thing is good, even if that new thing is positive. So it is a loss to lose something, even if that thing was not helpful to you. Same with getting out of an abusive relationship. Right? I mean, like, why do people stay? Not because they're crazy, but because it's really, really hard to actually accept something new. All right? That's human nature. So it's important to be open with that kind of thing. It's important that if you start to feel those feelings of, like, missing your old faith or missing your church or whomever, like, be honest with that. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. That doesn't mean you're a bad atheist, right? That'd be ridiculous, right? So, like, it's important to come to terms with that. Let's see. So I have a list of talking points. What I want to say is, I kind of just jumped right into it, but I like to start these kinds of talks with something that I heard when I went to a lecture on dialectical behavioral therapy, which is that I don't believe anything I'm saying right now. I try not to believe many things. I have some pretty good ideas, and I've seen some good evidence. I am willing to be told that I'm wrong, on pretty much anything, and I'm willing to see evidence of me being wrong, and I'm willing to change my mind if the evidence is strong enough, right? And so what we say in dialectical behavioral therapy is that there's a dialectic there. There's a dialectic meaning like things that we're talking to ourselves inside our own head, right? And we have a narrative going about our lives, right? And it's very, very easy to get stuck in the narrative of what I think is right. And it's very easy to, and you guys have definitely seen it in other people, it's very easy to push back against facts because it challenges your own narrative, right? So, in my opinion, my clinical belief is that healthy living includes some amount of optimism and open-mindedness. That being said, we all know about emotional harm caused by oppressive religious practices. I don't feel the need, and we can talk about it if you want, but I don't feel the need to kind of beat that dead horse because y'all are here. So, but open to discussion, right? We can talk all day about problems that people face because of beliefs that are forced upon you. However, there's emotional harm from leaving religion, and I kind of touched on that already. There's loss of belief, loss of identity, values, purpose, expectations, loss of connection to other people. In the addiction field, we say, well, I'll start with this. How many people think that the opposite of addiction is sobriety? I mean, makes sense, right? The opposite of addiction is actually connection, connecting with other people. And that doesn't have to mean substance addiction, whatever your vice is, right? Like the opposite of doing something harmful to yourself to feel good in the moment is actually feeling a connection with other people, which is why it's so awesome that you guys are all here. And you need groups like this. I was so happy to hear that there was one, especially in Polk County. No offense. Yeah. Rifle Range Boulevard, So yeah, I was really thrilled to hear that you guys have a group like this because you're already doing it. You're already in the healing process, in connecting with each other, doing community service, right? I mean, like I don't even have to tell you this stuff. You already know it. Shame versus guilt. What's the difference between shame and guilt? Anyone have an idea? I know you do. You guys. Huh. No, not. I like that actually. And what were you saying? Yeah.
I've heard of good shame and bad shame.
Have you?
Yeah. It's weird. Yeah, I'm trying to remember who I'm quoting here, but it'll come to me. He was the head of the men's movement.
Robert Bly, Iron John.
Yeah, Iron John, etc. And he outlines there's a kind of shame that wasn't toxic, and then there was a kind that was definitely toxic. But I don't remember the details, so I can withdraw that assertion.
So, again, I don't believe anything I'm saying, right? So, like, to me, I work on working definitions of things, and everyone has different definitions of things, and that's okay, right? Because there's not some guy in the sky judging us for our thoughts. That's part of this whole thing, right? So we can think what we want. In my opinion, and the way I use it in my practice, is that guilt is a temporary feeling, and it's based on something that we've done. So you're right, other people can put it on us or not, though, right? I mean, like we do something crappy. We know we've done it because we're not sociopaths, and we feel bad about it, and then because we are healthy people, we decide, you know what, I don't like feeling bad about this thing, I'm not going to do it again. So that's where kind of like where you're coming from with, like, you know, it's not a bad thing, guilt. It can be, but it's not necessarily, right? Because it's a useful emotion. Evolutionarily, there's a reason why we have every feeling that we have, and I believe that feeling, being able to be introspective and feel bad about something that we've done helps us survive, right? So somewhere in our evolutionary history, there was people who felt no guilt at all, and they perished. So there's that. Shame, however, again, my definition of it, is something that you feel about who you are as a person. So, it's like as parents, we tell our kids, you're not a bad person, but you did a bad thing, right? It's important to make that distinction, right? It's not you are bad. It's like that was bad. You're still good, so keep being good and don't do that bad thing anymore. Really scientific sounding, I know. But so shame is the feeling that I am bad, I am flawed. In the realm of addictions, the toxic thing about shame is that when we feel shameful, when we feel that we are the problem and there's something wrong with us and we are without hope or help, then we don't let ourselves heal. So in the realm of addiction, a lot of people end up actually dying because they don't feel like there's any hope for them because they're such a terrible person anyway, so they might as well just keep doing what they were doing. And that's probably true in the realm of depression and suicide as well. So shame is important to try to get rid of. There's no such thing as a bad person. I would say also there's no such thing as a good person. We're just people, right? Again, that's my opinion. Guilt can be useful. We got to ask ourselves if it's useful. Is me feeling guilty about this thing making me do better for myself or other people? If so, cool. It's actually a tool that we're using. If not, then we can get rid of it. That's easier said than done, right? But at least making that cognitive thought process in your head is a step in that direction. So this is something I like a lot. Built-in responses to people questioning. A lot of belief systems, not just religious, but political as well, have built-in responses to questioning. I think Scientology is interesting because they really took that and put it on overdrive, right? So in Scientology, from what I've read online and seen in interviews and stuff, there's this whole thing where if you're questioning, what's their guy, Xenu? If you're questioning Xenu and you tell your buddy, hey, I think this is kind of wacky, your buddy is supposed to report on you. If your friend does not report on you, you're supposed to report on your friend for not reporting on you. Right? And it's like that in political realms as well. I mean, fortunately, maybe we'll get there, but not here so much. But, in countries that are kind of ruled by religious factions, or in Stalinism and Leninism and stuff like that, you're supposed to report on yourself, or you're supposed to report on your friends. You're supposed to report on your friends not reporting on you. What does it create? Compliance, right? So we grow up with these built-in responses to people questioning, there's something wrong with this person. Something must have happened. The devil is talking through them, right? And what's really interesting about being told stuff is if I tell you the sky is brown, for a second, you're wired to believe it. And then your frontal lobes kick in and they're like, wait a minute. No, it's not. Maybe this guy needs therapy, right? But for a second, we believe that stuff. When we're kids, we believe everything to a certain age, right? And that stuff sticks with us. The stuff we soak up as kids, they say children are sponges, right? The stuff that we hear as children stays with us as adults, even if we cognitively know that it's ridiculous. So if you're brought up being told people who are unreligious have a problem, or people who have a certain sexuality have a problem, it's the devil or whatever, there's a part of you, small part, deep down, that still believes that. And you got to grapple with that. You got to face that and recognize that it's still there, right? It's not logical, But when we're talking about therapy, we're not talking about logic very often. We're talking about feelings, those things. Woo! So those built-in responses that we're taught as kids, we tell ourselves as adults, and then other people tell us that too, right? And then we have to deal with that, judgment from others. Misplaced empathy from others. You go to someone because you have a problem and they start telling you God will sort it out, or have you found God yet? Right? Maybe that's not what I need to hear right now. You'll find your faith if you just pray harder. Okay, that's not what I'm looking for. Look deep inside. I have. That's the whole point. When someone who has left religion is suffering, their religious family or friends immediately believe the suffering is a result of rejecting religion and would be fixed by coming back. Which is kind of what I just talked about. Anyone ever experienced that? You could be dealing with a breakup, a loss. You could be dealing with, I just lost my job. And someone wants to start talking to you about God, right? What's wrong with that person? Any ideas? Yeah. Are you a therapist? So chime in anytime. Please. I mean that honestly. Yeah, they're uncomfortable with your loss, and they have a built-in response which makes them feel, a little easier about life. As non-believers, you don't necessarily get that. You don't get to have that, sunshine and rainbows fairy tale. All right, you deal with life on life's terms, which is why I respect you people. So, yeah, grief and trauma. Oh, it's part of God's plan. They're with God now. Okay, cool. That doesn't make it not a loss, right? And that's not the thing I want to talk about right now. Cognitions versus emotions. We know rationally that we grew up believing that things we grew up believing were untrue. However, we maintain the physical, emotional feelings of guilt and shame. I kind of talked about that already. Freud, who was flawed in many, many, many ways, did say that the goal of therapy is to bring the subconscious conscious, and I actually think that that's true because we have a lot that we just kind of keep repressed, right? And when we face it, it can be uncomfortable, but the way out is in. I think George Harrison said that it's so far out, the way out is in. Things learned in childhood stick with us unless we are honest with ourselves and address them. And there's this concept of schemas. Schema therapy is actually something I'm a big fan of. And just the idea is that we develop beliefs, not necessarily religious or political beliefs, just beliefs about ourselves and the world. And we keep those with us through life. And that's an exercise I like to do in groups, actually, where we talk about this. But something can happen when you're younger, and it can be something that seems minute to anyone else, but we can formulate an entire worldview on it. And so an example I like to use, because it's completely non-religious, but I hope it brings the point home, is that my parents have a mango tree that's right by the sidewalk of their house. And every year, my dad is in a ongoing feud with the neighbors who like to pick his mangoes. And the reason that that tree is there, in my mind anyway, is because of a schema I developed when I was like 14 or something like that, which was don't question dad, right? You're a punk kid. You want to always be right about stuff. You're like, oh, come on, Dad. Don't you know anything? Yeah, I was that guy. I grew out of it. But so eventually I ran my mouth enough times to where my parents were tired of hearing it, and they showed that they were tired of hearing it in effective and appropriate ways. No abuse or anything going on there. But I learned not to question, right? Now, so then my dad was like, help me plant these mango trees. In my mind, I was a kid. I knew. Because I would go up to other people's fruit trees and pick the fruit. And sometimes eat the fruit. Usually throw it at stuff. So I knew if you plant it by the sidewalk, people are going to pick it. But did I say anything? No. Because the schema that I had in my head was, don't question dad. Right? Seen, not heard kind of thing, right? At least about planting, right? So, didn't question, helped him plant the things, kept my mouth shut, and now every year people pick his mangoes, which is my fault, but whatever. Maybe it's not fault, right? But like it's just an interesting thing. So we develop these rules in our head and we follow them. Maybe your rule is everyone keeps their shoes off at home, and you go in a new relationship, new boyfriend or girlfriend, and you go to their house and they keep their shoes on inside, and you don't think about it, but on the inside you're feeling a small level of disgust. And maybe you don't even realize it, right? Because it'd be ridiculous to say, like, oh, I'm breaking up with you because you guys wear your shoes indoors, right? But deep down, it's there. It triggers a feeling, and that's, the hope there is that we recognize that. We don't even necessarily have to say it out loud, but if we do, we do. But we recognize it, and we confront it. And we say, you know what? It's my belief that is causing me to feel this way. It's not an actual problem in the real world, right? So something that whenever I talk to groups of people, I just hope that you kind of leave thinking of at least one thing, and maybe it's something you learned from religion that's unhelpful to you even now that you are non-religious, but I hope that you kind of leave thinking of at least one thing that that you carry with you that's a belief about how things should be or ought to be that is unhealthy to you and that maybe you're willing to let go of. So adolescence, I'm a big believer in talking about adolescence because we're all just grown-up kids, right? I mean, what's grown up? Here I am giving a speech as a professional and I'm wearing a punk rock t-shirt, right? What's grown up? I don't know. Adolescents in all communities and of all socioeconomic backgrounds have several basic needs which they feel but do not always know how to express, including community, identity, safety, adventure, accomplishment, attention, acceptance, trust, validation. You're a kid, you don't know how to say, validate my feelings. And how many people came out of the closet as atheists in adolescence? Just one? Was it easy? No. Did people validate you? No. Is anyone surprised to hear that? Right. So, and when I talk with parents who are religious, my thing to them is like, okay, live your life the way you want to live and try to instill whatever values you want to instill on your kid, but you pushing it on them is pushing them away. And that's very, very true. So when we don't get these things, we sometimes seek them in unhealthy ways. Drugs, running with the wrong crowd, like getting into un-PG things. Or just feeling like there's something wrong with yourself, feeling like you don't need it, putting that feeling aside. I don't need to be validated. I don't need attention. I don't like people. Right? I mean, it's pretty normal to feel that way. However, we're social creatures, and if you isolate yourself, you're just hurting yourself. Let's see. So, I have a thing about trauma. Does anyone have any questions so far, though? Or feedback? Or is there any? Yeah? Yeah.
Experiencing things were, I was always, I tried to be a good Christian. I prayed, I did Bible studies, I sang in the choir, I taught Sunday school, and I never felt like I was doing it right because I didn't feel those feelings that I'm supposed to feel. And so I was in my late 20s when I left religion, and my husband at the same time. And so I experienced that leaving, and it was like leaving an abusive relationship, both of them. And have been considerably happier. I'm dealing with the after effects for the last 10 years, but considerably happier without those feelings that I'm supposed to feel. Like no one was like shaming me or anything. I just knew that I was supposed to feel that way.
It's built in, right?
So,
yeah.
It's I'm enjoying this. Continue.
Cool. Carry on. Thank you. Openness. That's one of the ways out. So, and this is where, like, when it comes to that question of, like, are people going to recognize, like, religious trauma syndrome, I would urge you, again, in my opinion, I would urge you to kind of even, like, maybe just drop the concept of it having a name and just focus on, like what she was just talking about, just focusing on what the actual problems that you're facing are, right? And a lot of the times it actually is a trauma that we're dealing with, either from like a significant event or a series of sustained ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. So trauma is actually associated with physical changes in the brain. You know, so like that concept of nature versus nurture is an interesting one to me, because like I think that the jury has arrived at it's mostly nature and not that much nurture that drives most people. However, we still, I mean, it's one of those things like you learn what you learn, but the way you learn it is because of who you are, and you're born with that, right? But then like we live in cultures where we absorb certain things. The thing about trauma is that it actually affects your brain chemistry. So it's actually more of a nature thing than a nurture thing. You know, trauma actually affects, just like, you know, you think about like you break your arm and it heals wrong. Now, who cares what kind of bone structure you were born with? You now have an arm that has a messed up bone, right? The cool thing about that is you can go to a doctor and have your arm fixed. And the way they do it is by breaking the sucker, right? And then resetting it. And it's the same with therapy, right? Like the way to fix your brain is actually by talking about it and even like being exposed to the thing that affected you. We do imaginal exposure, which is we're not actually going to re-traumatize you, but we're going to have you kind of like, you know, reimagine it. And that's a part of ART, which I practice, but it's part of several different kinds of therapies. And it can be really painful in the moment, but then you actually are able to heal. So I don't know. Did that make sense? I have this thing where occasionally I say a bunch of stuff that people already know, and occasionally I speak over people. My assumption is you guys are a very smart crowd, so if I'm saying stuff you already know, let me know. But trauma is often the result of violence, physical harm, or a threat of major danger. I did not make this up. I heard it from another professional whose name I forget. But when we experience trauma, when we're in danger, our brains go into REFT mode. That's remember every fucking thing. I should have told you to cover your ears. I did once. It was nice. Yeah, so why is it that we forget the details of a wonderful evening with friends or family, but we remember every horrible thing about a terrible thing that happened to us? Because evolutionarily, again, when we're in the midst of danger, we need to be hyper aware, hypersensitive, because we need to survive. Right? Animals are the same way. That's why, it's hard to rehabilitate like dogs who have been used for fighting and stuff like that, because they're just constantly on, right? Hard, not impossible, hard. And same with people, right? Not impossible. But when we're experiencing something dangerous, we really, really experience it fully, because we're designed to look for any escape, any way out, anything we can do. Which unfortunately carries the baggage of actually remembering that stuff. Thanks to our frontal cortex, which acts as a danger filter, we feel physical responses to threats that are not tangible and can recall those as if we experienced a physical trauma. So that's the kind of thing where it's like people might say something like, you weren't traumatized. What? People said mean things to you. Get over it, right? But unlike animals, we have this prefrontal cortex that actually, I'm going to the next page. That guy. We have this part up here, right above our eyes. I just thought that was a cool meme, too. But we interpret. We don't just take in our situations. We interpret our situations. So we see things, we hear things, we feel, we experience things, we smell things, but it's all interpreted in our brain, and it doesn't do the best of jobs. So we tell ourselves we're in danger when we're not, and when we think we're in danger, our nervous system reacts. And when we're constantly thinking that, our nervous system's constantly reacting, and that's the comfort zone now. Feeling calm is a weird thing for some people. So Anyone know the concept, or the term, the lizard brain? Yeah, reptilian complex. Yeah. Some people don't like that term. I love it. Because in cognitive behavioral therapy, we have this concept of black and white thinking, right? We want to try to not think black and white. We want to be able to recognize the gray area and not just be firm on beliefs about what things should be and what things shouldn't be open-minded, right? Am I explaining that well? So we can do that all we want, but our central nervous system thinks in black and white. Literally, it's just like we're either good or we're not good right now. So like we're either in danger or we're safe. And an example I use is a silly one. What's your least favorite food? Like what kind of food can you not stand to even be around? Really? You got to come over to Tampa. Julia will cook you some really good Brussels sprouts. But anyway, so something you hate like Brussels sprouts. Honestly, if you're sitting next to someone who's eating them, do you notice it? Do you notice that they're eating Brussels sprouts? You notice the smell. So, like what you like, right? But the thing is, your central nervous system in that moment is not fully at rest because you're smelling something that's unpleasant to you. Maybe you're thinking some version of how the heck could someone eat this? That's gross. You know, and like, I don't know, if you're like me, then you go immediately into desert island mode. Like, man, if I was stuck on a desert island with nothing but Brussels sprouts, which is never going to happen, but that's where my mind goes, right? So, you know you're not in danger. It'd be silly to say that you think you're in danger, but your central nervous system thinks there might be danger because there's something unpleasant nearby. And unpleasant equals bad. Pleasant equals good, right? So, that's how finicky this thing is, this whole thing, central nervous system. So when we're brought up feeling shameful because we think that there's something wrong with us because we don't have a belief, you know, or with other people telling us that, right? Or other people threatening us, you know, or you're in Catholic school and the nuns are hitting you, you know, like there's varying levels of feeling danger. But when we're brought up constantly feeling bad, then we kind of carry that with us, and we've got to face that and analyze it and, you know, talk about it and try to expose it so that we can move past it. And that is something that a lot of people might experience, even if you just have like an adverse reaction to seeing someone with a cross necklace or something like that. You know, like because it might remind you of, maybe it's great for that person, maybe not, we don't know, but it might remind you of something pretty negative in your life. What do I have next? So yeah, progression out of trauma. These are probably a little obvious. Compassion for yourself, compassion for other people. Some people can get to the point where they actually feel compassion for the people who have hurt them. Hard to do. I'm not going to stand here and say y'all got to do that. It is possible. What I notice 100% of the time is that when clients of mine get to that point, they're happy that they did. So that's my pitch for that. Forgiveness, right along with that, right? Something when I'm working with religious people, I often use this. Every major religion that I can think of has a section about forgiveness, right? Jesus turning the other cheek, right? And you know, we know that world religions were basically written to try to guide people, also to try to control people, but like to try to guide people, you know, to some version of healthy living, right? And there's a reason that forgiveness is in pretty much every religion, because people know that when you forgive someone else, it's not about them. That's why we urge, you know, forgiveness even if someone's passed away. Like, it's not about them, it's about you not carrying that nonsense around with you anymore. All right, so it's 100% a selfish thing to forgive other people. And I think selfishness is an underrated value, actually. We got to treat ourselves right. You know, we can't, and those who are helpers in the field, those who are parents, we can't treat other people well if we're not well. Got to have a well-oiled machine to help other people, right? So part of that is actually forgiving people so that we don't carry that around anymore. One path to that is empathy. Being able to recognize, maybe that person was hurt. Being able to recognize what someone said earlier, I think it might have been you, when we're experiencing a negative thing in our life, a loss or something like that, and someone else wants to say, oh, well, they're with God now, or God has a plan or something like that. That's that person feeling uncomfortable, right? I mean, like, it comes off as kind of a dick move, but like, but that's that person going, I don't know what to say, right? And even as professional in the field, I don't always know what to say, right? It's just, I just don't resort to those platitudes. But that person might know what to say, and they feel nervous and they want to help. So they say it's in God's hands. That's their way of helping, they think. But that doesn't make them a bad person, right? And someone who tried to force religion upon you maybe thought they were doing the right thing, right? That doesn't make it right, but that doesn't make them horrible necessarily. Some people are. but like, what's the good of us holding on to resentment for other people? Normalization. Speaking about it, talking about it, like you did. Just, recognizing that we're not the only people who've dealt with things and that other people have also, and it's fairly normal too. That is not to be dismissive. That is, it actually helps to know that you're not alone. Openness, talking about it, vulnerability. How many people are afraid of being vulnerable? What's the problem with vulnerability? What was that? Accessibility. Yeah. Anyone else have anything to add to that? Right. Do you? You're welcome. When we have been vulnerable in the past, people have hurt us. Right? So remember that whole thing, schemas, rules we create about ourselves and the world. Someone hurt me when I was vulnerable, so now I must not be vulnerable. Right? We got to break through that. I mean, not 100%, right? I mean, like, that's where, as a therapist, I got to watch my words sometimes, because some clients will take what I say way too literally. And they'll be like, oh, well, I told everyone everything. Well, slow down. So we got to at least try, right, to be a little bit accessible, especially with people that we're close to. We're adults, most of us, right? And or young adults even. We're all young, whatever. But like, we have the ability to see if we're in danger or not. We got to learn to trust ourselves. Another schema that gets developed a lot of the time is I was taken advantage of, or I was hurt, or something along those lines. So there's a problem with me. I don't have a good radar for it. My bullshit detector is just off, and so I must be closed off to everyone. All right? Give yourself some credit. You're a human being, right? And you have the ability to learn from past experiences you already have, right? So being closed off just hurts you. With trauma, if we think of it like, there's a door that's closed, that's keeping other people out. It's also keeping all your problems in, right? When you open that door, there's some free flow there. And sure, we might get hurt along the way, but that's life, right? We learned from those things. We learned to deal with it. Humbleness and humility. That, in my experience, is a problem amongst non-believing people. No offense. But when I first decided that I was a non-theist, I told everyone and ridiculed everyone. In high school, I ended relationships because of it. You know, like, we got to be humble and recognize we don't know everything, right? I mean, like, if you show, there's that Lewis Black bit about, like, going up to a religious person, showing them a fossil and throwing it at them. Like, if you show a religious person a fossil, they're so very often, I'm generalizing here, but they're very often so closed off that they don't even want to see it, or they're like, oh, the devil put that here, or something like that. But we got to make sure that if the rapture happened tomorrow, that doesn't become us, right? Like, we're not the person going like, it's not happening. Like, we got to be open-minded to things, right? Open-minded to the fact that we don't know everything. The whole point is that we don't understand the mysteries of the universe, and that's a good thing, right? At some point, actually, the lead singer of Bad Religion said this in an interview. At some point, not having the answers actually becomes like a relief. Like, I don't know anything, and nothing matters. Like, it's actually like a nice weight off their shoulders, right? So, along with that, creating meaning. Faith-based people will tell you that there's no meaning without faith. I'm generalizing again. I keep breaking my own rules. But that's okay. There are no rules. But I have a whole argument about how there's an evolutionary background to the concept of having meaning. Basically, my take on it is that anyone ever watched the movie Watchmen? The big blue guy says life is an overrated phenomenon, right? Anyone know how life works? I'm not talking about conception. But seriously, anyone know how life works? Any of it. I don't. Seriously, I mean, like, so in laboratories, they're still trying to, and I don't know if they have yet, but they're still trying to get all of the minerals that, like, are involved in, like, creating an RNA strand to actually cooperate and be life. And I don't think they've done it yet, right? So, like, the fact that, like, in the sun, you have several things that are going on, several chemical reactions that are constantly happening, and that's what creates, warmth from the sun. Nothing compared to what goes on in even an amoeba. Because there's all these minerals that should not interact with each other. They have no reason to, and it's not a chemical reaction like inside the Earth's core of the sun, but they're interacting with each other.
I think you're describing the Miller-Urey experiments, where they take what they call primordial soup.
Yeah.
And they basically brew it. They're trying to reconstruct what they thought were the initial conditions.
Have they been able to do it yet? Do you know?
They produce all kinds of amino acids and other complex molecules, but what they can't do is wait the billion years for those things to integrate into a cell. But what they can extrapolate is, hey, it's no mystery. This phenomena is happening everywhere.
Yeah.
And so all you need now is how long you stir the soup before you get something interesting.
Yeah. And but the thing is, it's not happening everywhere. It's happening on, as we know of, one rock in space, right? And, like, I'm sure that there's life on other planets, but I haven't seen it yet, right? Don't believe anything.
We see amino acids in cosmic clouds.
Yeah.
So we know that the chemistry happens, and there are a number of different ways it can happen. But yes, we don't see anything crawling out of it.
Right.
9 times out of 10, the environment's not suitable for what we call life.
Right.
You mean Star Trek's not true?
The lessons learned in Star Trek are 100% true. Yes. Me too.
Wait a minute. You said you didn't believe in me.
She got me. Yeah, in Star Trek, so, we have this concept of the rational or the wise mind, the emotional mind, and the logical mind. And a lot of times we can be a little bit too logical, and emotions are important. So Kirk very often goes to Spock for logic, but occasionally he needs to go to Dr. McCoy for that human emotion, and occasionally he has to just do something out of pure, gut feeling. Right, so we're there's a balance there. Anyway, So my point is about life is that it's ridiculously complex, and who are we to say it doesn't matter, right? And it's definitely not overrated, because you can create so many, things that happen in space in a lab, but they're still having trouble with the whole life bit, right? So to me, evolutionarily, our meaning is just that we are alive. We're part of a planet that's living, right? And it's probably a pretty good idea to promote life because it's pretty cool and difficult to even understand, which is also cool, right? So we do what we can to make our lives better and other people's and other creatures, right? And one of the other ways out of trauma is, yes, therapy. Good old therapy. Find yourself someone to see if you're not already. If you need help, let me know afterwards. Things to avoid. Being lazy atheists. So, using lack of belief as an excuse for unhealthy behavior. I see this a lot in kids these days. To sound like that old person. Honestly, because I work a lot with kids, I meet a lot of kids who I just wish that they were actually religious, because they're not getting the lesson of like secular humanism. They're basically just like, I don't want to go to church. It's boring. Okay. Some things are boring in life. You might need to learn how to deal with that, right? Now if you have a good reason, as I'm sure all you guys do, that's one thing. But not believing in things doesn't give us, is my opinion, but not believing in things doesn't give us an excuse for unhealthy behavior, and it very often can, And the other part of that is like, I think it's a good idea to prove faith-based people wrong when they cast judgment on non-believers for being like lazy or, being drug addicts or, like being heathens, whatever the hell that means, right? Like, I think it's not a bad idea to do what you guys are doing, do park cleanups and stuff like that, right? Like, it's good for you. It's good for the environment. It also sends a message. And I think that that's probably important. So, being an edgelord. What does edgelord mean? You probably have a better definition of it than I do.
Oh gosh. It's the dudes wearing the fedoras saying that they're better than you because they don't believe in God. It's literally what it is.
Yeah. Pretty spot on. So, like, I don't know, you go to dinner with your great-grandmother, and she doesn't have much time left, and she's so happy to see you, and she, before dinner, wants to pray. Please tell me that you're just going to pray with her. Because, like, it doesn't hurt you. And that's the thing that always kills me about, like, atheists complaining about, like, under God in the Constitution, under God in, like, the Pledge of Allegiance and stuff like that. Like, to me, as a person who tries not to believe in things, I have a problem with the Pledge of Allegiance, but I don't have a problem with the under God part because it doesn't hurt me at all, right? I'll say it. I'll say, praise Jesus right now. Like, it doesn't hurt me one little bit to say that because I know where my beliefs are, right? So, like, don't be that person who ruins Thanksgiving, please. It's just not good for you, and it drives, a wedge between you and your family even more. Like, there's a time for these conversations, all right? So, overemphasizing categorization, that's another cognitive behavioral thing. It's super normal to do. We like to categorize things, right? Oh, you're not an atheist, you sound like an agnostic, right? Like, who cares, again? But it's very, very, very normal and natural to categorize things. Why do you think we see shapes in clouds? Anyone? I'm not sure.
I think it's pareidolia.
I don't know the groovy word for it, but we are programmed to see ourselves.
Yeah.
what is familiar to us. We were programmed to look for that.
Yeah, well, we're programmed. Oh, was there a hand in the back too? Yeah. Yeah. Programmed evolutionarily to see patterns. Because if we don't, what's that?
Pattern recognition machines.
Yeah. You know, like so a dog sees a painting of a dog and just sees a bunch of splotches on paper, even if it's a spot-on painting, right? And there's also a difference between how our eyes work from other, animals too. But we absolutely, humans don't have a lot of weapons, right? Like, when I run an anger management group, I often ask people to draw an example of like an angry-looking animal. Like not a human, but another animal, because there's always that one, like, punk who wants to be like, I drew a human because we're angry. Like, okay, that's not the point. Like, I ask people to draw an angry-looking animal, and usually you'll get like a scorpion or a wolf bearing its fangs or something like that. And those animals aren't angry. They just have good weapons. We don't. We have a brain. That's about it. And we're born pretty vulnerable so that our brains can grow. There's a whole thing behind that. But so all we have is our brain as our weapon, so we have to look for patterns for things to seek out danger. Now, that can go haywire in a pretty non-dangerous society, which we live in probably the best times ever when it comes to being safe, right? So, historically anyway, like if you think of all of mankind. So, it's very easy to fall into categorization. It's very easy to want to just categorize everything and to do that to ourselves and to argue amongst ourselves about who is what. And it's probably better to just not do that as much while recognizing that you're still going to do it and don't feel bad about yourself for doing it. Right? Like I'll have those conversations with friends all day about like what bands are actually metal and what bands aren't. But the thing is, I'm not hurting anybody or myself by doing that. It's just fun, right? So like, pick your battles when it comes to wanting to put things into categories. Knowing versus being open-minded, kind of addressed that already. I don't know anything. I don't believe anything, or at least I try not to. I have to catch myself a lot. And we have to do that when it comes to following, like, political figures, and when it comes to following, like, inspirational figures. You never know when someone might go off the rails and you might follow them, Avoid playing religion's game, making it about numbers, proselytizing, trying to recruit or talk people out of their faith, criticizing for their beliefs. It's kind of fun to do, honestly. And if...
It doesn't work.
Right.
I did it for years, and you're not converting anybody. So,
right.
In fact, when you stop doing that, you start getting successes.
Absolutely. And why do we want to convert people? We're not a religion, right? Like, I'm sorry.
You said they just double down. Oh my God, do they ever?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, all you're doing is backing him into a corner.
Well, so do we. Right?
Yeah.
If I flip the script right now and try to tell you to join, Buddhism or something, you might double down.
I did.
Well, and Buddhism was a bad example because some argue it's not a religion, it's just a set of really good ideas.
Correct.
But, try to make you join Islam or Christianity or something, you would probably double down. That's what we do. Yeah. And when it's a human thing, not just a faith-based thing. When we have the finger pointed at us, our wall goes up. So of course they're going to double down. So why even bother? Who cares, right? If we're all going in the dirt, then they'll go in the dirt thinking that they're not. Okay, if their suffering is a different story, right? And that is different, and that's not what I'm talking about here. Like if it's someone who, you can see that you've been where they are and they really do need to stop and analyze themselves a little bit, or maybe get away from a toxic relationship or environment, whether that's with family, with their church, what have you. That's a different story. But just going around trying to get people you see someone wearing a cross necklace and you're like, do you really believe that? Like, we don't have to do that. It's not good for us. Same with avoiding things or people. Would you go to a church to watch a friend get married? Cool. right? So good. You're a healthy bunch, right? Would you listen to a song you really like, even if it's a religious song? Christmas music is the best! Oh my God. Little Drummer Boy. That's mine. And I actually like Little Drummer Boy because it's fairly secular, too. Yeah. But Hark the Herald Angels Sing, that song is epic. And why not enjoy it? It sounds good, right? Actually, Bad Religion wrote a Christmas album where they covered all those classics, and it's really, really good. And there's a lot of heavy metal Christmas albums, too. So, and they're actually very respectful to the songs. So, so avoiding in general, bad. When we have trauma, avoiding the things that have traumatized us. Now, obviously, don't go back to the abusive person, but, avoiding triggers, #triggers, can be good if you're freshly hurt, right? And you need to just be away from things that even remind you of the thing that hurt you. But at some point, we become reclusive, right? And that cannot be healthy. So at some point, and this is why therapy is such an important thing, right? Because, we got to be able to face things that upset us, but we also need help, and our friends and family are not necessarily qualified to help us. And, well, we can't go to a pastor because, obviously. So having someone who's a professional to help you through it, really, really beneficial. Talk to someone who's been through it, and you'll see a change in them, right? Let's see. Okay. How much time do we have left? Cool. So, A Tale of Two Addicts. I'll try to make this brief. But, and I think you guys already kind of will get where I'm coming from with this. But, two clients. I'll change their names and not use any details about their actual lives. But let's say John and Phil. Why not? Two clients, both non-believing people, both being treated at a substance abuse facility. Now, I could talk all day about the problems with addiction, for one thing, but also the problems with addiction treatment. And one of those things is, anyone a fan of the comic Doug Stanhope? He has a great bit about it, and I wish I could play it right now. Very vulgar, but addiction treatment very often is a whole lot of really good stuff: therapy, medication, groups, building community and all that stuff. But also, it pretty much every program out there promotes AA, and AA or NA, right? Now, NA is a little bit less religious than AA, but has anyone ever had a friend who's in it or read through the big book of AA? What were your thoughts on it? Yeah. Helps millions of people. Yeah. What'd you think of all the religious stuff?
That's what I had the problem with. But the community of people helping each other, that aspect of it, and someone listening to your concerns and your problems and that shared experience of having been through something and then saying you can make it out of that was helpful. So, later on, realizing that the spiritual part of it really wasn't necessary. It was the helping that helped.
Yeah, and what's funny is, I wish they would realize that. It's kind of lazy, and it's kind of lazy as a care provider to say, oh, your problem is you need God, right? But right on the money with it's the community that's helpful, right? And I tell clients all the time, I wish there was another group, and there are secular groups. There's Celebrate Recovery is
Life Ring over there, don't you?
I don't know about Life Ring.
I think there's a Life Ring.
I know about Refuge Recovery, which is Buddhist based. And what's up?
The problem I hear with AA is that they don't publish their recidivism. All you hear about is the hits, not the misses.
Yeah.
So that's a cognitive bias right there.
Yeah. And that's true. However, I stand by them because they do end up helping a whole lot of people.
I know several people that it's worked for, and that's wonderful.
Yeah. But if you read, I have a problem with the big book. And if you read it, there's a Doug Stanhope bit about it. I don't want to do him justice. But if you read the chapter to the agnostic, literally the entire chapter is how to not be an agnostic anymore and start believing in God. And I see some eyes rolling, and so there's a problem there, right? Because like if you have an adult in the room, they're going to be like, well, how can I get past? And it's like the third chapter, and there's a whole lot of chapters. So how am I going to get past this chapter, right? So Tale of Two Addicts. You have, what did I say, John and Phil? So they're both non-believers, and they're both in substance abuse treatment for pretty heavy addictions. And they both have a problem with AA because of the religious dogma that's attached to it. And they're both fresh out of their addiction. And when you've been using drugs and alcohol for many, many years, like, this might sound mean, it's not meant to be, your brain is not functioning optimally. It's just not. And so your decision making is impaired. And that's where groups like AA get a lot of like platitudes like, oh, your best judgment brought you here. They say that kind of thing a lot. And it's like, it's not exactly, therapeutically true, but there's something to it. Because if you're in an active addiction, you're poisoning your brain on a regular basis. You're not just having fun anymore. It's like you're dependent on this to survive. So you're not exactly the best decision maker. So John and Phil, both non-religious, both have a problem with AA. They both come to me and say this and voice their concerns. They're like, I don't like the religious stuff. And I give them my pitch, which is, don't throw baby Jesus out with the bathwater. I tell them about all the things that are in various religions that are actually helpful. Right? I tell them about how, a lot of faiths actually teach mindfulness to some extent. They actually teach self-control, right? And like you'll have like Yom Kippur where you fast. You'll have like Lent or Ramadan, where like you're actually like, giving something up. There's value in that. There's value in actually like learning self-control, right? There is a community aspect to it, right? There's other interesting things too. Praying before you eat, actually, is helpful to digestion. Not because God is reaching down and saying, now you're going to digest because you thanked me for this lamb or whatever. It's because, how many people here just kind of eat on the run? Eat fast food or eat while you're driving or something and just shovel it into your face and forget what you ate. I do, even if it's really good. Praying before you eat, all you're doing is you're slowing yourself down, you're practicing mindfulness, you're telling your mind and your body, which is really one thing, that you're about to consume food. You're breathing, right? Your digestive juices are starting to flow, right? Because like there's a weird disconnect between your mind and your digestive system. It doesn't really know what's going on, right? And so when you pray before you eat, you're telling yourself what's going on, and it's recognizing that. All right, you might start to salivate a little bit. That's a good thing. You're also being thankful for your food, and being thankful is just therapeutically awesome all the time. You don't have to be grateful to a provider in the sky, but just grateful that you have what you have, right? Or grateful to the animal who died or the plant who died. Plants have feelings too. So there are interesting little values in religious practices, is my point. All right, I digress on that one. I just think the praying before you eat one is interesting. All right, so before you eat your next meal, slow down a bit. Think about how glad you are to have it. Think about what you're about to eat. Anyway, so I tell both of these patients to just go with it. Right now, you're not in the best of places. This is a helpful group. Just go with it. When they're all praying to God, you say the word God, but you mean the universe, or you mean life in general, right? Like whatever you've got to do, whatever mental games you've got to play in order to go along with the program, it's not hurting you. One guy, I said John and Phil, right? John agrees. He says, you know what, I'll just swallow it, because there's a fear there. There's a fear you'll start believing. I really think that that's true. There's a fear that they'll get you, and you'll be that person who's saying, I used to be like you, but now I believe, and you don't want to be that person. So, I tell them, don't worry about that. You're strong in your convictions. You're strong in your beliefs. You're a strong person. You're a person who's going through some really, really rough times right now, and this is a group that's there to help you, and it's helped millions of people, and just, kind of go with it. Do what your sponsor tells you to do. I'll give you some alternate reading materials. You don't just have to read the big book. Read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I think that's a book that everyone should read. She's got it back there. And John says, you know what? All right, I'll suck it up and I'll do it. And he goes through the program, he goes through treatment, he does the 12 steps, he laughs while he's doing the give your problems to God one, but he does it anyway, and he ends up actually recovering and finding sobriety and not changing his beliefs. He's glad he did it. And he has some empathy for religious people now, too. He can go to Thanksgiving and he doesn't roll his eyes when his grandma's praying, right? Phil says, F this, right? There's got to be another way. I've been avoiding religion my entire life, and now to try to get sober, you're going to push religion on me? That's not going to happen. And he does not have the support, and he fucking dies, is the end of it. Yeah. Because he goes out and he starts using drugs again because that's where he feels comfortable. Right? That's a friend that's always there for him. Right, and these other people are just not what he needs, and he's comfortable with that, and he overdoses and dies, right? Who would you rather be? The person who stuck to his convictions and stuck it to the man his entire life until he died in a gutter? Or the person who just kind of swallowed it and said, yeah, you know what? Sure, yeah, I give my problems to my higher power. Great. Why not? Right? So anyway, I think that there's value in that, and I also thought that, anyone ever watched the show Westworld? There's a scene in Westworld where Hannibal Lecter, what's his name? He's not Hannibal Lecter in the show. Anthony Hopkins is talking about the human brain, and he pulls up this picture, and I think it's pretty deliberate that where God is hanging out is the human brain. You see the frontal lobes, you even see the brain stem, you see the occipital lobe back there, right? So there actually are valuable things in religion, and we don't want to just throw it all out. That's why I say don't throw baby Jesus out with the bathwater, right? Like, we can look at it from a secular lens, and we can analyze what's there, and we can pick apart the things that are actually helpful, and toss out what's not. But you never know, right? So it is something that I talk with my clients who are openly non-theistic about is, from that lens, pick up the Bible again or something like that and just look through it and see what might be there to help you. Or see what's interesting. Right? At the end of the day, you end up being able to relate to religious people more. And if you are in a crusade to, convert them over, then you actually can use empathy, which works a whole lot more than pointing fingers. So that's the end of my slideshow. Let's open it up for questions. You have a mic. You have a mic. Okay.
When you were talking about shame, I think I recognized Bradshaw's family systems definition. Bradshaw is long ago. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called family systems, and he defines shame the way you were doing it.
My guess is a lot of people do. When it comes to family systems, Virginia Satir is my girl.
Yes. He quotes her left and right.
Okay.
His favorite quote is, many people need therapy, and she said, no, everybody.
Even therapists.
Why do you feel, or let me back up. We briefly talked about meaning.
Yeah.
And I think the human psyche is driven to feel meaningful. So, where does the atheist find that meaning?
Meaning to me is a lot like happiness, in that functionally there's not really a definition. So, like, has anyone ever said to themselves, if only blank, then I would be so happy? You know, if I could just get a... Well, I mean, we do that with little things, right? I mean, like, you know, if only I had a good haircut, or if only I can convince so-and-so to like me, or, you know, like, once I get this raise or this promotion, then I'll be so happy. And then the thing happens, and we are happy, but on the inside, we're still the same, right? I think it's the same with meaning. When we go chasing it, we don't find it. I think it's something that we find in the journey, which is something that you probably see on Facebook memes a lot, but it's true. I think that, like, for myself, for instance, definitely went through that, like, you know, mid-20s existential crisis. And when I stopped trying to find meaning in my life, because of the work I do, the field I work in, one day I just kind of realized I had it, which doesn't mean I'm done, right? I mean, like, it doesn't, like I don't think anyone's ever done. That's kind of the gift of humanity, is that we're always able to learn and grow. But yeah, I would say, like, if we can put, just like knowing the answers to the universe, like, if we can put those questions out of our mind and focus on what's in front of us and focus on basic principles that don't have to come from religion. I forget who said religion has no monopoly on morality. You know, like, but basic principles like the non-aggression principle, right? Like, let's just not hurt other people, right? Like, so if we put those existential questions aside, focus on what's in front of us, we find that we have it. That's been my experience. I don't know if that answers your question.
Not really. But that's okay. I mean, I think you spoke to some really important things. I think that if I'm understanding what you're saying, let me reflect. So, meaning, you find meaning by trying to detox from a drive to find meaning.
I like that. Because it's kind of a thing that, like there's no, like, magic pill, right? And so there's no, just like happiness, like, there's no, like, one answer, you know? And, like, yeah, people can try to sell you stuff, but I think it really seems to be one of those things that if we are #living our best life, then then we one day find out that we have it. But maybe the question also, I see a hand, maybe the question also, like, maybe the expectation is greater than it could be. Right? I mean, maybe the expectation is once I find meaning, I'll be self-actualized, and, you know, light will be beaming from me, or, you know, what have you, and I'll be happy all the time. I'll feel great constantly. That's not life, right? So along with meaning maybe comes a little bit of suffering, and accepting that, and accepting that it's not the feeling that, like, Christians will tell you they feel when they're in church. You know, maybe it is, though. I mean, I don't know. I feel very, very happy and even, like, joyful and gleeful a lot. And that's not a faith-based thing. I don't know. That's not
stress out about finding that, because we have that meaning, we have that happiness already built in, and the seeking it out is the problem.
Are you a therapist?
I wish I could have found you.
I'm a master's in psychology, but
nice. Can you speak into the mic so she can hear you?
Yeah,
Sure.
I could have called it up.
That's okay.
Thanks. What I was saying is that we already have meaning and we already have happiness. So stop looking for it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's simple. Like, stop complicating things. Just be alive.
Yeah, I think the word I was looking for was purpose as well. That's the real religious drive, that we must have purpose. Why are we here? What is our purpose in our religion? attempts to answer that, creates the question and then attempts to answer it.
Yes, yes. I've struggled with purpose a lot recently, and so I stopped looking for it.
I love that answer.
That solved the problem.
There's a hand behind you, Sarah.
If you stare at evolution long enough, the only thing that seems to be, I don't want to, you can't say that nature has intention, but the reoccurring theme is reproduction. That's what nature does. All nature that doesn't do that disappears. So if you're going to strip it down to the bare essentials, that's what is happening.
That's the driving purpose.
Yeah, that's
Well, so that was kind of my point about life, right? So we could say procreation, but also just life, right? Like, we don't have to procreate in order to promote life as humans, because we have a frontal lobe that can let us, kind of differentiate those things. But I saw a hand again. He's got you.
Already having purpose, like in addition to reproduction, we're all part of a system that has a purpose. So like it fertilizes the Amazon, that we could say that's part of its purpose, even though they're not even connecting or touching. And so that's part of our purpose, is to be here because we add to the world in some way.
Yeah, that's right in line with the point I was, making. Absolutely. So it takes some thought, right? It takes some rationalization, but it also sometimes takes what you said earlier, just deciding I'm not going to think about this right now. I'm just going to, keep doing good, right? And not getting caught up in what's right or not, but just keep doing things that, maybe help the world or at least don't harm it, right? And then we find that, it's the Wizard of Oz is the thing. I was thinking this entire time. What's the movie where the person had the thing they wanted the entire time? Wizard of Oz, right? They all had the things that they wanted the entire time. And so, there's lessons there. And I think that's probably true for all of us. It's, true for happiness. It's true for meaning, too. Maybe stop chasing it, because we've been programmed, especially those of us who grew up religious, we've been programmed to think that it's this external thing that's given by something else, right? And so I think the humanistic argument is that it's not. It actually comes from being human. It comes from the slide's not up anymore. But that's, the Sistine Chapel, it's the human brain that's giving life to Adam, right? Sure, God's hanging out there, but it's the human brain. It's humanity that gives us what we have. And when we leave religion, we feel a loss because we're divorcing ourselves from this idea. It's not real, but this idea of this other entity that's in our lives. And it can feel very lonely to not have that anymore, which is normal. It totally makes sense to feel that loneliness. At the end of the day, as a therapist, I would rather a client be religious and happy in a dream world than not. But I'm definitely thrilled when people come to me and say that they're, questioning their faith, and that they're trying to, they're looking outside of that, especially if it's something that's been oppressive. Any other questions, thoughts, comments, criticisms?
Is there one religion or denomination of a religion that you see the most, you have to deal with?
Is there one
that you have trauma from?
In the U.S., it's probably Christianity.
Yeah,
that's the main one.
But any kind of denomination.
I don't like to criticize actual belief systems, because they do help people. I find a lot of the times like Jehovah's Witnesses tend to turn a blind eye to spousal abuse, which can be bad, but they don't always, right? I mean, and so I'm anytime I answer that question, it's I'm generalizing, because The fact is, like, if people want to do bad stuff, they can use any belief system to justify they're doing that bad stuff. Look what the Buddhists are doing to the Muslims in, I forget which country that is, but like, and that's like the most peaceful religion on the planet. But, yeah. So like if you want to do bad stuff, you can use any belief system to do it. You can use atheism to do bad stuff too, right? So I mean, that's not a specific answer to your question, but I just don't like to go down that road, because if a client comes to me and they say they're a Jehovah's Witness, I don't like to assume anything. I mean, like, because I've also, some of the best people I know are strong believers, and some of the worst people I know are atheists, and then also some of the worst people I know are strong believers, and some of the best people I know are atheists. So,
Can I speak to that a sec? Yeah. I think what I'm hearing you ask is there any particular denomination that tends to be more destructive? Yeah. And I come from multiple facets of Christianity. I come from fundamentalism. I come from charismatics. And then even the progressive Christians that we see more today. And I, from experience, the more fundamental, the more controlling the ideology, the more destructive the form. Mm-hmm. Sure. You're welcome, Keith. Oh, no, you're the best. No, you.
Both of you. But yeah, I mean, like, I'm very careful not to jump in, because I've made the mistake before too of hearing someone say that they're, like a born again Christian or something like that, and I immediately, go to judging them or feeling sorry for them when. Yeah.
What trauma do you see the most, like, from certain denominations? Like, what do you see the most?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that the ones that are more strict would be the ones, because then when you leave them, they cast you out, and that's a big problem with that too.
Is it more of a problem now than it was, like, years past, or is it kind of fading away? Is it still the same, like, amount of?
I'd say we're in the mushroom of it now. Really, it was very unusual to leave something like that in the past, and it's just now becoming, I think, where people are finally saying, "Ooh, I have that brain that I didn't know I had," and they are taking those risks and stepping out. And I think that there's more support in the community also, like this group here, to say you've got a place of belonging, you have a place you can go, so that you don't feel like you're isolated and alone, which is, I think, one of the most traumatizing human experiences is to feel isolated.
Absolutely. Yeah, so, like, it's kind of case by case, right? Because, like, you guys, it's awesome you guys exist here. There are probably counties that don't have a group like this, right? So, like, what do those people do? Well, you guys got together. But, yeah, I mean, it different for everybody.
My situation is very different. I was never religious. I wasn't raised in a religious household, so I've never had to. This is somewhat foreign to me. But I do remember growing up in the 70s and 80s, and I never was around people that, even if they went to church or they were religious, they weren't like it is today, where there's, to me, what I see is there's a lot of anger and judging and that kind of thing. And I find it growing, I mean, this is my perception, that it's growing worse than better, like she said.
I think that's the marriage to politics.
Well, that's part of it. That is part of it.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Since more people are feeling free to express themselves, and the people who are religious are feeling more fear, more discomfort, because their comfort zone is being invaded by people who don't think like them, so they're going to backlash. And so eventually it's going to calm down where everybody realizes we can just be, possibly, hopefully.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think, like it was, like, it's interesting, right? Because it was one thing in like the '90s when like Marilyn Manson was like the guy who was scaring religious folks, and like there's some amount for the religious folks, there's some amount of comfort there. It's like, okay, so people on that extreme will follow someone like that, but most people aren't. But now the people who are scaring them are people who look like us, right? So there's probably something to that, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I do find that society as a whole feels more non-theistic now.
And they can be just as right wing. Well, they are. There's some that are, but yeah.
Well, there's also.
Pentecostals. Well, in Pentecostals, I'm talking about the more far right religions. I find them dangerous, especially when they're hooked in with politics.
But I found them as a whole, though. Aren't the numbers decreasing on a whole?
On a whole,
right. So it doesn't matter who might be growing right now. On a whole, the whole system is starting to fall apart.
And is so much less religious than the United States.
Well, I think it's also interesting that there are a lot of people who are finding their own, right? Like, so, like, you'll get a lot, and these people get a lot of flack, but the people who say, like, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual, right? Like, everyone's, like, a spiritual healer these days, I've noticed, which is part of it, I think, not good or bad, really. Probably better to be finding your own thing.
It was a good step.
Yeah.
Years ago, to be able to say, I'm not going to be religious, but I don't want to not be spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And so that catchphrase, now it's laughable, but in its day, it was that healthy first step.
It was.
It really was.
I think it still is. It's just unfortunately, when things become buzzwords,
right,
they get laughable, but there's still some value to that.
Yeah.
And like, I say I have some theistic tendencies as a joke, right? But like, I think it's a good thing to be open with ourselves. If you feel like that's where your mind is, don't be ashamed of it. And same with friends and family and stuff like that too. Like, like why not? It's a big world. There's room for lots of different people and lots of different beliefs. So that doesn't answer any question, but it's just a thought. So interesting times, for sure. Absolutely, whenever any kind of politic becomes faith-based, that's a problem. But I would argue that all politics are faith-based because you have to have faith in something. People replace religion with the state. That's a problem too. So that's why I try to not believe in anything, right? Even in the political realm. Anyone else? I think we're over time. Feedback, criticisms. Is there anything that I need to change my beliefs on? Not that I have any. Not that I have any beliefs, but. Yeah, working on it.
Well, for those who put PTSD, right? So let's just use the sparklers.
Exposure therapy works, though.
If you're there to clean it up.
So I can hang around for a bit if anyone has any one-on-one questions, or if anyone wants any help pointing in the direction of finding a counselor or something like that.
Personal questions.
Sure, why not? Sarah, did you have any? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mario.
Thank you very much. And now, wow. And now Rachel will come up to speak.
Okay, that's fine. So my PowerPoint was so pretty. Canva, let Canva be your new friend. For our next community fundraiser, we've teamed up with Zelda's Canine Rescue. It's a nonprofit. Hey, there it is. I know, right? So we reached out to Zelda's Canine Rescue, the owner, Jackie Rose. Of course, I made it apparent that I did say it was through the atheist community of Polk County, and I did spell atheist out for her, and she did, and she did say, yes, that was great. So we're going to team up with Zelda. Go ahead and hit that next slide for me, Sarah, please. Zelda is a nonprofit organization. They rescue all animals. And it was founded in 2013. Go ahead and hit that slide for me, Sarah, please. Jackie Rose is the Zelda's mom and president. And she had this nice little quote that I liked. She said, "We believe every life deserves a chance." Next slide, please. So they've been rehabbing and rehoming animals since 2006. And it all started with a rescue puppy named Zelda. Next slide, please. In 2006, Zelda was found along the roadside by Jackie. She rehabbed her and kind of brought a love to Jackie and kind of set her on the path of rehabbing animals and finding homes for them. Zelda, unfortunately, she did die in 2015. But she was like the mom of all the animals. She welcomed all the animals to the shelter. And she battled a lot of stigmas for Jackie about the pit bull breed, that a lot of people have misconceptions about that breed. So not only do they help dogs, they help all animals in need. They help, she said potbelly pigs. Oh, not pugs, sorry. Guinea pigs, hamsters, and of course, cats. So they also focus a lot of care on senior animals. There's a lot of people that will, unfortunately, do surrender their senior animals, which is absolutely heartbreaking. To go through your whole life at a home and then get old and someone sends you away. So she deals with a lot of senior care and a lot of behavioral issues that some animals have. So she rehabs these animals with behavioral problems. So what can you do to help? What can we all do to help? She did say that of course, there's always need for dog food and towels and blankets. She does have a website and a Facebook page that links to a PayPal account where you can donate money as well. Next slide, please. And then this is a little video that Keith put together. Some of the animals that she has rehabbed over the years. And our Betty is included in this, so you'll see Betty as well. that didn't make you cry, I don't know. But so the greatest part about seeing the journey of an animal Jackie's rehabbing is you see the animal in such dire straits, almost on the brink of death, and she rehabs these animals, and by the time she's done with them, you don't even recognize them. They look like a completely different animal. So it's pretty amazing to see that journey happening and the transformation that happens with it. So we're going to be collecting dog food supplies until October 25th. Also, too, like I said, she does have a PayPal on her account, on her website. And the website's the next slide, and a Facebook as well. Okay, thanks, guys.